So good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar on cybersecurity for your practice. We thank you for joining us for this valuable presentation that will provide an opportunity to learn more about cybersecurity, how you can protect your business and what is being done to protect digital health information. My name is Angela Heathcote and I'm from Eastern Melbourne Primary Health Network, and together with my digital health colleagues from PHNs across Victoria and Tasmania, I would like to thank our guest speakers for this webinar, cybersecurity experts from the Australian Digital Health Agency, Tracy Weeks, Kim Clark, Danielle Pentoni, and also Kathy Rainbird from the education team. I would like to start this presentation by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people and other people of the Kulin Nations on whose unceded lands our work in the community takes place. We recognise and value the knowledge and wisdom of people with lived experience, their supporters and the practitioners who work with them. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and wherever you may be dialing in from, and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So before we begin this session, just to let you know that all attendees will remain on mute throughout the presentation. Please type any questions for our speakers in the Q&A and this at the bottom of the screen, and this will be answered at the end of the presentation when Kathy will be facilitating with our panel a discussion on cybersecurity experts. So let's get started. I'd like to hand over to our first speaker for this evening. Thanks, Tracy.
Hello, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're really pleased to be invited along to talk to you all about cybersecurity, which we know is definitely a hot topic at this moment. There are so many things we can cover when we are talking about cyber. However, in today's session, what we're going to do is take a little look at why we need to talk about cybersecurity. We're going to have a little look at how cyber attacks eventuate. We're going to have a look at cyber resilience, what that means for your practice, and then we're going to touch on the My Health Record system security. We also have our director, Danielle. She will be joining us tonight and she'll be available at the end of this session to assist with any questions that you might have. So digital transformation, it continues to improve so many aspects of our daily lives, including our healthcare outcomes. However, as digital transformation and reliance continues for both organisations and individuals globally, the market of opportunity for cyber criminals also increases. This is why it's really important for us all to start a conversation about cybersecurity, because cyber criminals will always aim to find weaknesses in our organisations that they can exploit through things like cyber attacks. And this will be things like phishing and ransomware attacks. These motives are typically driven by financial gain, so the demand for ransom to release locked data, which we now know as ransomware, and we need to understand that the healthcare sector is a prime target. A cyber attack can lead to things like loss or theft of information. It can lead to the loss or theft of our intellectual property and research data, significant disruptions to our service delivery. It can cause reputational damage and loss of consumer confidence. So before we move on, I do have a quick question for you to think about. What do you think has a higher value on the dark web? Do you think it's the sale of a credit card, or do you think it's a sale of healthcare record information? Well, according to a recent Trustwave report, healthcare data record may be valued up to $250 per record on the black market, compared to about $5.40 for a payment or a credit card. The reason being, healthcare records provide a plethora of information that can be reused for activities like identity theft and extortion, while a credit card is easily cancelled and replaced, and funds are often recovered. However, if your identity is stolen, it does have ongoing ramifications. I've been working in cyber security in the healthcare industry for well over a decade now. So we've been talking about this for a really long time and how attractive healthcare data can be to cyber criminals. And we've recently seen this come to light and witnessed the fallout from these kinds of breaches. A couple we're going to have a little chat about tonight are the breach of our private pathology clinic, where over 220,000 personal records were breached. This included things like the tax file numbers of staff, Medicare numbers. This included driver's license, passport details. It had people's credit card information, their medical and health records that were associated with their pathology results. We also saw in October of last year the Medibank private cyber attack and the data breach, and this attack resulted in the largest breach of personally identifiable and sensitive health information in Australia to date. That included over 9.7 million customer records being impacted, with 200 gig of diagnosis, healthcare claims, and personally identifiable information, which was accessed and sold on Russian language cybercrime forums. The origins of both these attacks have not been fully disclosed. However, it is alleged that the Medibank private breach was a result of a staff member's credentials being compromised. What this means is that cybersecurity really is everybody's responsibility. It takes absolutely everybody in our teams to be vigilant, our staff, our colleagues, IT teams and vendors that we're working with, to ensure that the availability and the delivery of your services and the protection and integrity of the information that has been entrusted to your practice. Ensuring that you and your team understand their responsibilities and take accountability for them, because one of the biggest risks to any healthcare organisation, cybersecurity, will always, sadly, be the human factor. Developing strong cybersecurity behaviours will actually help prevent cyber attacks. When a cyber attack or data breach occurs, it really is rarely the fault of the technology. The Office of the Information Commissioner reported that 96% of data breaches are actually the result of human actions. And of these 96%, 33% is due to human error. So that's things like sending information to the wrong person or accidentally posting information online. And 63% is then due to malicious attacks, and that is staff receiving email phishing attacks. While this statistic can sound alarming, it's actually really important to know that there are some very simple steps that you and your team can take to start on that journey to protecting yourself and your practice from cyber threats. And Kim's going to take you through some of those threats now and how you guys can protect yourself quite simply. Thanks, Kim.
Tracy. So how do cyber attacks happen? Because 91% of all cyber attacks begin with an email to an unsuspecting victim, we will first discuss email phishing. So what is phishing? I would be surprised if any of us here today have not received a phishing email or SMS message. But as a refresh to what phishing is, it's when cyber criminals pretend to be a known company, such as a government organisation or your bank, in an attempt to trick you into completing their requests, such as clicking on a link that will take you to a fake website or opening an attachment that would have a computer virus or malware attached to it. Phishing attacks are sent to thousands of people at a time, and they often capitalize on what's happening in the media or current events. With tax time approaching, here is a recent phishing sample that is being circulated, but with awareness training, you can start to discern that this is a scam. So let's go through some of the warning signs. The first warning sign is that the email address is incorrect. In this example, it appears that it's from MyGov, but in fact, the actual email address is incorrect. The second is there's a generic greeting, dear customer. It is unsolicited or unexpected. Does MyGov actually send out refunds? They generally do not, so be sure to critically analyze any content of such emails. It creates a sense of urgency or an emotional response. Perhaps you may be feeling excitement that you're getting some money back. May contain spelling or grammar errors. I say may because today's scammers are using spell check, and if you look at the specific example, you'll see there aren't actually any spelling errors at all. And it, of course, has a malicious link or attachment, which if you opened would take you to this website, which is known as a phishing website, where any details you enter would be stolen. Now, this is why your attendance here today and ongoing cyber awareness and training is so important, because after today, you'll know how to identify a phishing email, so you hopefully wouldn't reach this stage. But if you do, you should, number one, always check where a website is taking you. If you checked the web address here, you would see that it is in fact an incorrect website. And secondly, reiterates why it's important to keep your software up to date, such as your web browsers, because our modern web browsers will tell us today if a website is dangerous or if something is not quite right. Fortunately, this example didn't stop there. In addition to taking your login details, they would also try to steal your credit card information as well. I also have some recent SMS phishing samples, also known as smishing, to share with you. The first is the hi mum or hi dad, which as of December last year, Australians had reportedly lost $7.2 million to this scam. The second is an unpaid toll scam. Now, there are several variations of this circulating, but if you did click on this link, you would then be taken to a website such as this, and these samples were actually sent to me by a friend who unfortunately provided not one, but 2 credit cards before realizing that it was a scam and contacting her bank right away. So I want to discuss with you business email compromise, or BEC, which cost Australians are reported $98 million in losses last financial year. And that is an increase of around 30 million from the previous year's reports. So it is really impacting and affecting Australian businesses. So what is business email compromise? Compared to phishing, it's highly targeted. Phishing, they're casting out a wide net, hoping that someone will take the bait, whereas business email compromise attacks are also known as spear phishing. So the common types of BEC scams include CEO fraud. So the criminals pretend to be the CEO and to manipulate staff into taking action. There's payment redirection fraud. So an organization's account is hacked and is used to request payments, usually through fake invoices. Unfortunately, I am hearing this is increasingly common with building companies. A participant in one of our presentations said that her family and others had sent money to a scammer as a result of their builder being hacked. And these were quite large sums of money, around 20K per transaction, so the stakes can be high. And finally, data theft. So criminals may target an employee to obtain personal sensitive information about other individuals within the organization and then leverage this for future attacks. And if you take a look at the sample on the left, this is a copy of an actual CEO fraud attempt. You'll see there actually aren't any hyperlinks or attachments like you would usually see in other phishing emails. This is a social engineering tactic. They're trying to build that relationship first to make it seem believable. They'll then follow up with an email, such as, please transfer this money to this account or make this fraudulent purchase. So how these attacks work, just going to take you through the anatomy of a business email compromise attack. The first step, criminals compromise the email or IT of a legitimate business. They observe transactions and identify opportunities to divert money into their own accounts. They'll impersonate trusted senders using a hacked email account or simply spoofing the email to appear from a known contact, as we saw with the earlier phishing samples. They'll then send the email. The victims will complete the request. And unfortunately, businesses often only realize they've been caught out once it's too late, when the legitimate company is chasing any outstanding payments. How to recognize a phishing or business email compromise attack. Before opening any links or attachments, stop and think, are my emotions heightened? Consider this a red flag if your emotional state is elevated. Did this message actually come from the legitimate sender? Remember, it may appear from your bank or a government organization, but often the actual email address will not be correct. Did my friend or colleague actually send this to me? Remember, they may be hacked or someone may be impersonating their accounts. Is this the correct website? Before you visit a website, hover your mouse over the link to check where it is taking you. And if you're unsure, do not open the link. However, if you do enter any details, be sure to reset those passwords or contact your bank. And if you've downloaded software or malware, disconnect it from the internet, run an antivirus scan, and contact the Australian Cybersecurity Centre for support. And we'll share those details at the end. Does the offer sound too good to be true? If so, it probably is. And lastly, can this person prove their identity? If not, do not do what they're asking you to do. Hang up and contact the company directly using details you've sourced independently to confirm. We're going to discuss ransomware, which according to the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, the ACSC, remains the most destructive cybercrime threat. This is because ransomware can impact everyone, from everyday Australians through to entire countries. In May last year, the Costa Rican government declared a state of emergency following a ransomware attack on nearly 30 of its government institutions, including health, finance, energy, and social services. Thankfully, Australia has not experienced an incident of this scale, but the potential remains for cyber criminals to cause widespread disruption. So what is ransomware? It's a type of malware attack where criminals will steal and lock access to the files on your device. The criminals then issue a ransom demand in order for you to get the key to unlock your systems and avoid the public release of data. The ACSC does not advise paying the ransom because there's no guarantee you will regain access to your information or prevent its release. It will make you susceptible to further extortion, and paying the ransom demand also encourages and stimulates the economy of organised crime. So how do ransomware and other malware attacks occur? They are the result of opening links or attachments in those phishing emails, opening links in the smishing text messages or social media posts, downloading dodgy applications or software, or visiting malicious websites on the internet. Why is healthcare such a prime target for ransomware attacks? Healthcare is seen as a lucrative target because of the criticality of the services delivered and the pressure on health sector organisations to maintain business continuity. The prevalence of outdated information technology and operational technology systems, which can be easily breached. Valuable intellectual property holdings, such as research. We saw this at the peak of the pandemic where COVID-19 vaccination research and supply chains were being targeted by nation states. The public trust in health sector organisations, particularly those linked to government services. And fifth and final, personal and sensitive data holdings, which are valuable targets as they can be sold and leveraged for blackmail, which we did unfortunately see with the Medibank private incident, where folders of information, some titled HIV, STD, and mental, were publicly released for sale on the black market. While data privacy has always been the common concern of a cyber attack, a US study has also found that cyber attacks can have impacts on patient safety too. And this has been backed up by an incident in Germany. So what happened? An individual was being transported to a hospital by ambulance. Mid-transport, they were rerouted to another hospital 30 kilometres away as a result of a computer outage from a ransomware attack. The patient passed away during that unplanned transit to the next hospital. However, the cyber criminals reportedly stopped the ransomware attack after learning they'd disrupted the hospital and possibly caused patient death. Ransomware can happen to anyone at any time. If your device is infected with ransomware, you should disable all connections to the network, take a screenshot or photo of the ransom message, and contact your IT provider for support or call the Australian Cybersecurity Hotline to report the attack and seek advice on how to recover. The ACSC is available to help all Australians impacted by cyber incidents, and they're available 24/7 through the hotline 1300 Cyber 1, or you can contact them via their website. Study I wanted to share with you all is a cyber attack that is actively targeting the Australian healthcare sector and the legal sector. Trend Micro has performed this analysis and released a report just last month. Accordingly, this report was shared with the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, and we as the agency cybersecurity team also shared an advisory to our partners on this threat. So if you're not on our external contact list to receive this alert, please let us know. So the attack is known as SEO, which stands for Search Engine Optimization Poisoning. So what is happening? In a nutshell, criminals are leveraging search engine keywords such as hospital, health, medical, and enterprise agreement paired with different Australian city names. I've highlighted the highlighted boxes are the poison links, and I have retyped these web addresses so that you can see where they would actually take you. But how many people do you think analyze the source or the website before opening it? We don't always, but we need to start scrutinizing and analyzing links and attachments before proceeding. Because if you clicked on the first link, you would be taken to this fake blog forum. And if you read these posts, there's nothing concerning in the discussion content. As you can see, the admin here is encouraging users to then click on this enterprise agreement. And here we have what happens if you were to download the enterprise agreement, or if a healthcare worker opened this agreement. As you can see, it is probably the legitimate enterprise agreement, but hiding in the file is malware, which will install itself onto the device, and in the days to come, data will be stolen and ransomware will likely be deployed. And this is where cyber awareness training becomes so essential, and your attendance today here is also important because we can train ourselves and our staffs to look up at the web address or look down perhaps if you're using the new iOS on iPhone and check that the web address and what your web browser is telling you before you interact with the content. And I've increased the size here, and you can see if you were to look at this web address, this is not that it would not be correct, and you can tell that it is something malicious. In summary, this is not a new type of malware, but researchers are seeing healthcare and legal sectors being impacted by SEO poisoning. So the key takeaways are to be aware, inform your networks that these attacks are happening, take caution, and be discerning of content on the internet and web searches. And secondly, always check where a link is taking you before opening or interacting with the site. Prevent malware attacks, these are some steps you can do today. So the first is keeping your software, applications, and operating systems up to date, never clicking on links in an email unless you're certain it's safe, never opening attachments unless you're certain it's safe, and backing up your devices regularly to ensure that if an attack occurs, you don't lose all your important information. Leads us into how we can protect ourselves from cyber threats. So reiterating those practices I just mentioned, the following are some summarized practical tips that you can adopt both at home and at work to prevent cyber attacks. First is securing your accounts with strong passwords and multi-factor authentication. We recommend that you please visit this website. It's haveibeenowned.com, but instead of an O, it's spelled with a P. Perhaps you've heard of it before, but it was developed by Australian cybersecurity researcher Troy Hunt. So on this site, you can see if an email address or phone number of yours has been caught up in a data breach. And I'll bring up the site now. And here is one I've prepared earlier. I'm picking on Tracy as I know she has been caught up in data breaches with this account. But if you scroll down, it will tell you where exactly this account has been caught up. Here you can see there was Canva, Mathway, and an online gaming platform. If you have been caught up in any data breaches, be sure to reset those passwords and any other passwords or any other accounts that have used that password. And if you're like an Apple user like me, you may have even received alerts that passwords you are using are weak as they may have been a part of a known breach list. They're leveraging this same technology, and it's really excellent to see. Makes a strong password. The first, it should be long. Here at the agency, we actually have a minimum requirement of 15 characters in length or longer. It should contain uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and special characters. Cannot be easily guessed, so not your pet, partner, or child's name or dates of birth, and avoiding any sequential numbers or keyboard strokes. Importantly, they should be unique. This prevents something known as the domino effect, where someone obtains or guesses the password for one account, they can use that to gain access to all your other accounts as well. So a technique to creating a strong password is a passphrase. So we recommend taking 3 or 4 random words and mashing them together with some complexity. So here we have somewhere over the rainbow, or cats and dogs love sunshine. A final tip is to please keep your passwords secure. Do not write them on a Post-it note and put it on your screen, or avoid saving them on a blank notepad labeled passwords and just saving that on your desktops. These will be targeted by hackers. Instead, write hints rather than your actual password and protect them in a password vault. So a password will protect us against all unauthorized access, but passwords alone can unfortunately be cracked by malware. So multi-factor authentication provides that necessary added layer of protection in case your password is breached. Today, most accounts such as MyGov, banking, or other critical accounts require MFA by default. And if you're not already using MFA, consider setting it up on all accounts where it's offered. You can also use authenticators such as Microsoft Authenticator to generate those one-time passcodes for you. Like everything in cybersecurity, there's unfortunately no such thing as a silver bullet. There is a new syndrome now referred to as MFA fatigue, which caused the large multinational networking firm Cisco to become compromised. So, what happened? Criminals had access to a compromised password. To gain access, though, they needed that MFA link. So the cyber criminals started calling and pretending to be the vendor support and sending multiple MFA links to the staff member, hoping that they would click one. This is where the MFA fatigue came in. The user unfortunately clicked the multi-factor authentication link, which gave the scammers access. But fortunately, they were detected and removed before they could cause any real damage. So one of the key takeaways here is always be aware of phishing attempts. Phishing emails or SMS messages, particularly in the form of MFA logins or malicious login attempts. Is 2 critical device and network security practices you should adopt both at home and at work to prevent cyber attacks. The first is ensuring your devices and all the software and apps on them are kept up to date. I've said this a few times tonight, but this will ensure that you're running the latest version, which fixes any known security vulnerabilities. And if you're running any outdated or unsupported software, ideally it's not connected to the internet and you're devising a strategy to upgrade those technologies. This is because outdated legacy systems are vulnerable to cyber attack. Secondly, keeping frequent backups of all critical informations and system settings. Ensuring data backups are stored securely off-site and in a segregated network. This will prevent loss due to fire, theft, or malware. And regularly testing and restoring backups to ensure they work as required in a recovery scenario. If you are using a managed service provider, ensure they are doing as contractually promised to you with regards to your data backups. Element of device security I think we can overlook when we're talking cyber is the physical security of our devices, making sure we lock our screens when we walk away and protect our devices when they're unattended. In another presentation I've delivered, when we were discussing this topic, a clinician shared his story. While working on a laptop on wheels at a child's bedside, they needed to go off and speak with their parents, so they stepped outside the room and left their device unlocked. When they returned, they saw the child having a good old time playing games, reading emails, and browsing the web. Now, while that is a relatively harmless example, we need to keep in the habit of locking our devices to ensure no one can gain access or tamper with sensitive information. Now, if you're using a Windows device, we have a little poem that can help you remember, and it's going to pop up on the screen, and it is Alt-Control-Delete before you leave your seat, or Windows L will work as well. And on that note, I'm going to hand back over to Tracy to discuss cyber resilience.
Thank you so much, Kim. That's one of my favourite little rhymes there. It will help us remember to lock our computers when we walk away. In this final section for today, we'd like to also provide you some tips to build cyber resilience in your personal practices. So what is cyber resilience? It is simply the ability to be able to continuously deliver your business objectives and organisational services despite a cyber incident, event or attack. This slide here really is to help tie in everything we've discussed during the session today about and put that into an actionable strategy and plan for your practice that will help protect your business from cyber threats. And then the most important thing is to recover as quickly as possible. So the following is simply a starting point and just some questions across some key areas that we should be asking ourselves to help protect our businesses from potential cyber threats. So let's start with our people. Do they know how to respond if they have clicked on a link in a malicious email? Kim's giving you some really valuable pointers today, but other people that are working with you, are they trained to recognise and respond to cyber attacks? Does your business have processes and policies in place in relation to cybersecurity? And does your practice have a plan for when something goes wrong? And most importantly, has it actually been tested to make sure that it works? Are your computers and laptops kept up to date? So do you guys maintain regular backups in case something goes wrong? We really encourage everyone to review the Australian Cybersecurity Centre's Essential 8 strategy. This is a baseline of strategies that will actually make it harder for cyber criminals to compromise systems and will help an organisation to respond to a cybersecurity incident. And we suggest considering conducting a gap analysis to actually look at what you do have in place, where you guys need to be, and how your practice will get there. We really do not expect you to know the answers to any of these questions today, but do consider meeting with your IT support team to be able to discuss further. We also suggest taking some time to visit cyber.gov.au because here is where you can find more about the Essential 8 and access many free resources to help protect your business. And in the next slide, I'll show you an example of this particular website. So the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, Kim has already mentioned this fantastic organisation several times today, but they are available to help Australians impacted by cyber incidents. So if you're working like in a state or private facility, it's best to follow their processes, which will be most likely to report to your IT department if you are a victim of cybercrime. However, if you have your own practice or you're at home, you can contact the Australian Cybersecurity Centre on the number on the screen. It is important to know that there are many, many resources available to you if you've been personally impacted by cybercrime. I personally have used ID Care following the Optus data breach. That's a fantastic service. And most of these agencies have a social media presence. So I strongly advise that people actually follow them on your different social media platforms, because then you'll be pushed information on the latest scams, and you can actually see what's happening around Australia, so you can be alert and aware to what's happening. We also have the Australian Cybersecurity Centre where you can actually go online there and view their report cyber as well, so you can see what scams are available, and you can also subscribe to the free alert service via ScamWatch. As we just mentioned, as part of the Building the Cyber Resilience plan, that we really are encouraging staff to get educated on cyber awareness. So the Australian Digital Health Agency has developed a free e-learning course for people who do work in healthcare. So this course has recently been updated. It was developed by our agency cybersecurity team, and that was also done in consultation with representatives from a really large range of healthcare settings and disciplines, which includes medicine, nursing, pharmacy, practice management, and allied health. It is a great resource. I strongly advise everybody to register. It will give your staff a very good understanding of how to protect themselves from potential cyber threats. As well as completing our free online learning course, you can also register on our website for lots of upcoming webinars and find a range of software summary sheets, and you can explore our YouTube channel. And just before we finish up with this section of the presentation, we also just wanted to have a talk about the My Health Record system security. So I think the security and the privacy of the information that's held by the agency really is one of the most critical tenets of our role in developing national health infrastructure and services. And therefore, we work very closely with the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, the Australian Signals Directorate, and along with national and international partners, which allow us to maintain a visibility of that national and global threat environment. The agency has also implemented a range of security controls to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the My Health Record system. And this includes a range of security processes that limit access to My Health Record system and ensures that external software goes through a conformance process before it's allowed to connect to the system. Also, as those who regularly use the My Health Record, you will know that in addition to these security controls, the My Health Record system also has built-in security features which are designed to enable healthcare recipients, carers, and authorised personnel to be able to monitor and control the access to their own records. So if an incident was to occur, this would need to be reported to the Office of the Information Commissioner, and all healthcare provider organisations are also required to provide assistance in relation to any inquiry or assessment in connection with My Health Record system, which may be conducted by the agency. And these steps are in place to ensure we're able to continue to keep the information in the My Health Record safe and secure. So while we're doing our part to protect the integrity of the My Health Record system, healthcare organisations also have a responsibility to protect the system from unauthorised use and access. And any organisation registered with the My Health Record system must have what we call a security and access policy in place, regardless of the organisation size and how often they use the My Health Record system. So the security and access policy is critical in supporting the healthcare provider organisations to protect the information of your patients, and it also assists in building staff awareness of their obligations under the My Health Record legislation, which basically means at a minimum, your security and access policy must reasonably address the following issues. So how people are authorised to access the My Health Record system and how that access can be deactivated or suspended when certain circumstances arise. It also looks at the training that is provided to employees before they have access to the My Health Record system, including how to use that system accurately and responsibility and their legal obligations. The process for identifying a person who requests access to a healthcare recipient. It also looks at the physical and information security measures taken by healthcare providers and organisations and people accessing the My Health Record system. It looks at mitigation strategies to promptly identify, act and report on security risks and assisted registration information if possible. And to assist with this activity, there is a policy guidance template, which is available from the link provided in this presentation. And this includes a policy requirements checklist, which is really helpful. And don't forget that there is also an e-learning course for developing healthcare record security and access policy for your organisation. So that's available to assist you in this process as well. So thank you so much for your time today. We have our director, Danielle, with us, and we are now available to answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Tracy. We've got a few questions coming in from the audience, but I think we'll start off with some questions that have been posed previously. And I think that if anyone else has questions, please feel free to type them in. But one of the key ones is, Danielle, I know that Kim's presentation really covered off some of the things that people can do within their healthcare practices, but what would you say would be some of the key tips to healthcare providers to protect their clinical information systems?
I would definitely say, number one, implement some sort of email filtering, have a discussion with your IT service provider, ensure that you've got email filtering. The other thing that I would say is, do you have appropriate antivirus installed on all of your systems that you use? If you're using any software that is, or any solutions that are very specific to your practice, have those softwares undergone some sort of penetration testing, which is basically uncover vulnerabilities before an attacker can actually exploit those vulnerabilities in your environment. Looking at some of the backups, because at some point, if you are attacked, do you have backups to have your systems up and running quickly? And the most important one, I would say, is use multi-factor authentication on all of your systems. Don't just trust your password, use multi-factor authentication.
Thanks, Danielle. And I did notice a comment come up in the chat before regarding the slides from today's session. And yes, they will be shared with all the audience. So you'll all get a copy of those, and the links to the resources work, the hyperlinks will work in there. So you'll be able to access those. So Kim, this might be a question for you. It relates to the making sure that you have a good, strong password. Are those password generator apps that you can get worthwhile? Are they a good thing?
Myself, yes. To answer the question in short, essentially yes. So password managers help us manage that multitude of passwords that we now have, and to help avoid the use of simple passwords or using that same password across many accounts, a password manager can really help us mitigate that risk. So it's important that to know, firstly, to use a reputable password manager software, and know that, as I mentioned, there is no silver bullet. So while some of those reputable companies have also suffered data breaches themselves as well. So if you are using any sort of tool or technology, it's important to keep on top of what's happening with that, keeping that software up to date, and importantly with a password manager, making sure you have a strong master password and you put that somewhere secure so you don't forget it.
And another one for you, Kim, I think you mentioned it a bit earlier in your presentation, but there's a question from one of the attendees tonight. How can you tell if a website is okay or not?
So one of the telltale signs is making sure it's the correct website. So I saw on the news recently, even Domino's or any other sorts of online retailers are being duped online. So first, you want to make sure that you're on the correct website. Secondly, if a website, if you go to the top of the bar, it should be HTTPS and secured. And that's another good sign that you're able to trust that the information you're putting on there, such as your login details or your credit card information, is going through a secured connection. I hope that answers the question. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything.
Any others?
Making sure it's the correct website is definitely the starting point of.
Yeah, there's something called Google Safe Browsing. So if within, you can just Google this, and within that safe browser, you can check if you've got a link and you're not sure about it, just copy paste it very carefully into that safe browsing link, and it will tell you whether it's malicious or not.
Thanks, Danielle. Kim, I think this is another one perhaps for you, or maybe for you, Tracy. I'm not sure if I'm reading this question correctly, but it's what does the switching to airplane mode do? And I think that relates to when we were talking about the ransomware attacks.
Yeah, so airplane mode will switch off your mobile data. So it will switch off your ability to take phone calls and things like that. So yeah, it simply just cuts out that mobile data. So potentially if you have maybe clicked on a link and a suspicious message that's come through your phone, by turning on your airplane data, it will just stop any further connection through to the information that you might have on your mobile device.
And does it also stop internet connection?
Yes.
Yes, I'll just add as well. The reason I've put that in the slides is because you might turn off the Wi-Fi, but your mobile data will still be attached. So just hitting airplane mode will cut that connection of your mobile data as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks, Kim. Danny, another question for you. And you talked a little bit before about penetration testing for software systems. Can you talk a little bit about what the agency does in terms of our requirements for software vendors, and also what else we're doing to protect the My Health Record system?
Sure. So the agency is, cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of security threats right now facing the sector. So part of what we do is there's a set of security requirements for systems connecting to the My Health Record. Now, these have been identified. They are aligned to the Australian Cybersecurity Centre's Essential 8 maturity model. These are also aligned as areas as part of the Information Security Manual as well. And these security requirements have been provided to software vendors to ensure that any of the software that is connecting to the My Health Record aligns to the best practices that we have advised. So that's in terms of security risks that we're trying to address by systems that are connecting to or accessing the My Health Record. Tracy and Kim did touch briefly upon what we do within the My Health Record and the kind of security that we have. So, like we mentioned, there's a range of technologies. For example, we've got firewalls to block unauthorized access. We have restricted access with multi-factor authentication for whoever's trying, has admin access to MHR. We've got audit logs to track access to records, who's able to see what have they accessed in the last couple of hours. We have data loss prevention tools also to restrict the movement of sensitive data outside of the MHR system. We have system monitoring set up. Our cyber monitoring team monitors these alerts. So we've got several alerts that have been set up, and it's all based upon threat intelligence that we receive, which would tell us that something malicious is happening in a particular place and we need to block it. So there's different alerts that we have set up during the course of the day that if it triggers, we keep investigating. For example, connections from potentially threat sources or malicious sources, or multiple failed logins from a particular person or a particular IP address. So these are all the different controls that we have in place.
Thanks, Danny. And I think, Tracy, this reiterates back around to what you were talking about in terms of possibly the biggest threat to the data in my health record would be through local practices, healthcare practices, and their cybersecurity level. And I guess I'd ask you for your key messages to the practitioners on tonight in terms of making sure they've got their staff up to date.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kim really did cover off a whole lot of those really key risks in this evening's presentation. And sometimes it can sound quite scary thinking about all the things that are out there, but they are very practical tips, and ensuring that you know how to identify phishing emails, because they will be that one way that a cyber criminal will find their way into your system. Is that I used to say a lot when I'm educating our agency staff, is that we can have all the policies and processes we want in place, but it can take one click on one link, one email for someone to gain access to your system. So being really aware of what phishing emails look like and how they can affect your systems is critical. So getting your staff trained on that. And I can't strongly enough suggest is that if you haven't gone on and completed our e-learning course that's available on our agency website for cyber awareness, that you do that as a priority, because that will give your staff that really strong understanding of what to do in that situation. And also, again, we can teach people how to recognize phishing links and all that sort of information, but also, as Kim's provided tonight, what to do if you have clicked on one of those links. So understanding those key things to protect the system. So if someone does click on a link, to making sure they're disconnecting from the internet to stop that ransomware attack potentially going any further in your systems. They're some of the key things. And having conversations as well, and making cybersecurity a regular part of your conversations with your team and also your families at home. I think that's super important as well. It's really great to see that cybersecurity is being talked about more in mainstream media. People are talking about cyber threats, consistently. And I think the more educated we are, the more people talk about it, the more you realize what's happening and how to be more aware of what's a potential threat to yourself, to your family, and to your practices. So those conversations are vitally important, but I cannot stress enough, recognize what phishing is and hop online and get yourself trained, and also look at your digital footprint. Also look at the information that you're putting on social media, because that information can be used in social engineering attacks, and they can actually then craft particular emails around the things that you like to try and get you to click on one of those links.
So I think that Angela has just posted, hopefully everyone can see it in the chat, the link to our training website, which has that course on digital security and access
fantastic.
Training. Yeah. So there's another question that's come in, and it's particularly relevant for clinicians at the moment, with some of us working remotely and actually having remote connections into the clinical practice, so into the GP practice, for instance, from a remote connection. So how can we ensure that those remote connections to our server are safe? Tracy, would you like to take that one?
I might defer this one to Danny with a bit more of a technical background on this one.
So I would say, use the virtual private network. Get your IT service provider to work with you in deploying those VPNs. Depending on what your risk appetite is, look at devising security policies along with them. Those security policies will help secure whatever you're trying to secure or what you're trying to connect to. Something that you probably heard thrown around in the cybersecurity environment is zero trust. Again, this is probably something that's very technical, but I would say if you're using an IT service provider, have a chat with them about how you could use zero trust, using intrusion detection or prevention systems, having firewalls. All of that are best ways to secure your remote access. But VPNs is a starting point. It can get fairly technical. So reach out to your IT service provider or your managed service provider and have a conversation with them on how you can secure that remote access based on what you want to protect and what you want to connect remotely.
Thanks, Danny. The other thing, another question that's come in that might be for you, Tracy, in terms of getting assistance if you've had a breach. The question is that website that you mentioned for businesses only, or is it also available if there's been a breach on a personal computer?
Yeah, it's also available personally as well, which is brilliant to know, because I think that's one thing that terrifies us the most, isn't it? We know often when we're at work that there are places we can go, but when it happens to us personally, we can get a bit panicked. So that, yeah, absolutely, it is all the details we've shared there are ones that you can contact, especially the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, if you've been personally affected as well. And again, I cannot stress enough just how great ID Care was. If anyone online was caught up in the Optus data breach, I'm sure there were plenty that were, or the Medibank private data breach where you have had a lot of your personal information stolen. They provide some fantastic resources and really practical steps on how to protect your identity moving forward, how to do things like credit checks so that you can make sure that your identity is being used and taking loans out in your name, things like that. So they are honestly some fantastic resources. So use your social media apps, connect through with them, with those different agencies, and then you'll get the information readily available to you.
Thanks, Tracy. So Kim, this might be one for you. We talked a fair bit about making sure that practices are backing up their data, which of course is really important, especially in this day and age. But in terms of storing that backup data, if it's from the clinic, how reliable or how secure is it if you're storing that data in the cloud?
I can certainly make a start on this question that I might defer to Danny. But in terms of going to the cloud, it's about what's on your risk appetite, taking a risk assessment and assessing what, definitely choosing a reputable provider and doing an assessment on them, but also what's the risk of potentially not having that data available at all if it wasn't in the cloud. But I might just pass on to Danny to polish that response up.
So I think that was good, Kim. Just to add to what Kim was saying, what are the security measures that you want to put in place? If number one, data breaches is very important. You want to ensure that you're protecting yourself and your organization from a data breach. You want to ensure that misconfigurations, they're the number one vulnerability in a cloud environment, and this can lead to overly giving privileges to people who shouldn't be having that access. Unsecured APIs, we know what this costs a particular telecom provider. And the fourth one that you want to look at is probably unauthorized access, having access control. So if you want to put in some sort of security best practice, again, have a conversation with your IT service management provider. Look at encryption capabilities. One effective way to protect your data is to encrypt it. Which is basically within the cloud environment. It will transform your data from plain text into an unreadable format before it enters into the cloud, and ensuring that your data is encrypted both in transit as well as at rest. There's another one that you could do is also implement data loss prevention policies, or have a tool that your IT service provider can implement for you. And they would have sort of visibility across the environment, depending on what sort of environment you've implemented, whether you have a private cloud or a hybrid cloud or a public cloud environment, and keeping in mind what your security posture is, what your governance requirements are in your organization.
Thanks, Danielle. I think that point about encryption is a really worthwhile one to remember in particular. The second question that this attendee's asked is probably one for Barb from Eastern Melbourne PHN, perhaps to respond to, which relates to how secure it is to upload data from the clinic to Polar, which is run by your PHN. Or do you want to take that one offline?
No, I'm happy to. We've got some documentation that might help you with some questions you've got. So I'll put that in the chat. Just to mention, the most important thing is that data is all de-identified data.
Good point. Yeah, great. And a final question from that attendee is regarding companies that provide cyber insurance. Danny, I might ask you, is it worth taking out cyber insurance? And I don't think we can mention a specific company, but I'll let you handle that one.
So what I would say is, well, from an agency perspective, I can't give you any companies that provide cyber insurance, but I would definitely say that given the current threat environment, it is good to take out cyber insurance. Please be aware that when you are taking out cyber insurance, that you would need to do a risk assessment. The insurer would want you to do a risk assessment of your entire environment. So, and that's something to keep in mind before you do any cyber insurance.
Great, thanks, Danny. And I can see that Barb's just posted that fact sheet in the chat. Thanks, Barb, for that one. And I think that is most of the questions, unless I've missed one. Angela, I'll let you check that we've answered all of the ones that have been posed this evening.
You have. Fantastic. Thanks, Kathy. And thank you so much for the panel for answering those extra questions. It's been a really informative session, and I think a lot of tips that people can take away from tonight. The resources that we've posted in the chat, we will actually include those in the follow-up email that everybody will receive, which will include a copy of this presentation, the recording, plus also some useful links that we'll pull out to provide to you. So please remember that your PHN is here to help you, and also the Digital Health Agency have also offered their assistance. So if you could please take a moment to complete the survey at the end of this presentation, there is an opportunity there for you to leave your details if you are wanting some follow-up support or support with registering for My Health Record or any area in that space as well for education. So thank you everyone for your attendance tonight. A great session to finish up on time. I'll let you all get back to your evenings. So have a great evening, everybody, and good night. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everybody.